Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of post-hardcore, looking at music in the post-hardcore genre. We've had two very different tracks so far this week, one not what I was expecting and the other closer to what I was, so it's interesting to see such variety right off the start. I'm going to be moving forward today with The Fall of Troy, which is really interesting. Yesterday I released the live stream for public watching, and in it we checked out a track off of this album called Mouths Like Sidewinder Missiles. That's track 5. The holy tape that we're checking out right now is track 6. So, let's get into this and see what The Fall of Troy is bringing to the table today. Yeah, bringing that bass in like that. That nice call and response right there. Ooh. Yeah, okay. Bass coming in super funky. I can't believe it's been less than 90 seconds. We've listened to so much music already. Ooh, what a... wow. He's getting a little mathy here. What's with the rising up the scale? Interesting subversion there. They dealt with dissonance so much that a very full resolved note like that was unexpected. Something that was pointed out to me so far. Granted, Mars Volta yesterday was a special selection and not part of Post Hardcore Week. Um, it still lines up really well, but we've had Gospel, TMV, and Fall of Troy back to back now, all of which are experimental post hardcore. At least I feel like this is a bit more experimental. There's a lot of things in here that push against conventions. I don't know necessarily against genre conventions. I'm still exploring post hardcore as a whole to find out what exactly are its bedrock sounds, but palatability conventions, I would say, are definitely pushed against here. And we started off the week with Fugazi, which, after reading a lot of the comments coming in on that, it is both not post hardcore and very much the origins of post hardcore, which is just because post hardcore was anything that came after hardcore, anything that took that as a jumping off point, and bands went in several different directions. They took that and jumped in lots of ways. Eventually, the genre would kind of condense down into a more formulaic mainstream sound, but at the beginning, it was kind of a wild west of, this is what hardcore does, what can we do with it? So it's just interesting that we got kind of post hardcore that wasn't like modern post hardcore, and now we're getting post hardcore that is like modern plus post hardcore plus the experimental side. I wonder if we only have 2 more days left here. Are we going to hit something that is standard post hardcore, something right down the middle, not too experimental like in the opening days when we didn't have. A more narrow view of what the genre was, or something, less experimental, like these bands who have taken that core sound of the more narrow version of it and then expanded it out in different directions. There's definitely a bit to this double-ended funnel here in the middle where it's most narrow, and that's kind of what I was hoping to listen to. But this is also eye-opening because it gives me an opportunity to understand that the genre is not static. Much like when we did Metalcore Week, and I realized that the beginnings of Metalcore were very different from the melodic Metalcore that we got um, toward the end of, toward the beginning of the popularity of the genre and how it evolved through the 2000s and where Metalcore is at now. Like, these are very different movements of one genre. Post hardcore seems to be the same way, and it's giving me a better understanding of the genre, not just as a static entity where it was most popular, but where people have taken it and where it came from. So it's still a good week, even if we don't get anything more typical, but it isn't really helping me understand what the foundations of the genre are. And I'm kind of hoping the next 2 days are more of that foundational stuff, just so I can see how this stuff experiments on it. What of this is the experimental part and what of this is the rooted aspect. Now, talking about the song in particular, it's interesting because I honestly felt like the song could have been over 90 seconds in. There was so much music happening that when I looked at the time and it was only like a minute and 10 seconds in, I was honestly baffled. I knew it was a short or a medium length song. It says 450 here. Um, but I don't know, just it was it was a weird temporal thing where it felt like we had been listening to it for a lot longer than we had. And I think a lot of that comes down to just the sheer velocity of shifting ideas and how much music is in each of them. I can't even tell you about specifics about any of them. It's more of a general vibe. We have our two guitars doing different things. The bass frequently has its own line running counterpoint to the two guitars doing their counterpoint. It's just three moving melodic linear, I think. No, I think they are looped on a larger basis. I think they were like doing 8 bar phrases. Um, but still, three moving ideas, all doing their own thing. The placement in the sound, having one guitar on the left, one on the right, and the bass center really helped with all that. The drums are wildly performative. There's so many neat ideas going on in there, just embellishing concepts and fun little one-off ideas, and then the fills, and it's never a static experience with our drummer. Our vocalist has a lot of energy in their clean vocals, and the rhythm in our vocal melody doesn't line up with what anyone else is doing. It's honestly a fourth melody here. It is now that I'm laying this out, I'm like, dang, there are four moving lines going on here. And the drums can even be considered a fifth moving line if you want to look at them as more of a melodic drumming. They do air a bit closer to sitting in the pocket and leaning into the groove and rhythm, but there is just enough embellishing and linear ideas in it that I mean, I think if you wanted to make an argument for it being its own melodic concept, I would not disagree with you. And that makes the song feel very dense because we not only have all of this movement compacted into a moment in time, but we revisit this idea of the 4 to 5 moving layers 4 different times, I think, in our opening 90 seconds. It's just a flurry of ideas. There's so much music being dropped. It's just kind of mind-boggling. And what's interesting is I don't know that I would have picked this up had we not just listened to them, but I got a lot of Mars Volta vibes out of this. A bit more restrained for sure, but just the bonkers amount of layering and constantly adding another melodic component. There isn't any instrument doing foundational work. Our bass isn't laying down pedal tones or walking a bass line. We don't have a guitar doing chords. We don't have a drum kit just sitting in the pocket. We don't have a vocalist who is strictly doing textural rhythmic stuff like they would if they were doing a harsh vocal. It's just a flurry of melodic layers, and that's what TMV does a lot. It's what makes their songs feel overwhelming. And this certainly does go into that direction. Like I said, they don't lean into it as hard. I don't know what specifically it is. It might just be the palatability of everything, where Mars Volta will intentionally put in a saxophone line that feels so far divorced from the notes being played by everyone else that it almost feels like a separate song entirely. Everything in this track is cohesive. All of the dyads and triads that are created when these instruments play their notes at the same time fit harmonically with what's going on, and they fit atmospherically with everything going on around them. Nothing really feels out of place, and maybe that little edge towards cohesion is enough to make it less overwhelming. But whatever the reason is, this does feel a bit more palatable and thus listenable to me, while still utilizing many of the same composition techniques, which is what leans me into the experimental side of it. I also picked up that it was linear. I think we had like a verse chorus thing going on at the beginning, but after the 90-second mark, we entered into a completely linear design through the rest of the track. Um, We began to hear more unification of our guitars as they would do the same ideas, lean into chordal ideas rather than melodic concepts. We also had shorter riffs going on. We had one idea that was very cool. The guitar riff was repeating itself over and over, just panning from left to right. We entered into some really groovy rhythmic stuff as well. Um, but again, it's a series of so many different ideas that it's hard to keep track of all of them. Um, the next one that really stands out to me is the rising scales. Just start at a note and go up the scale until you hit the highest note, which I think they went an octave. Start over, do it again. Start over, do it, and they did it over and over and over while introducing more and more layers of tension. The two guitars were harmonizing, but they weren't in perfect harmony. I think the first time they did it, they were playing the same note. Then we moved to like a third up, and then we had like a fourth up, which introduced a bit of tension. Um, and maybe we stuck on that fourth, and then we slowed it down so we could really hear the tension on each of these notes. And when we get to the top, we actually resolve to a really beautiful dyad that leads us into our final 50 seconds or whatever of just ambient consonant sound. Uh, I don't I don't know. See, this is the experimental part is that none of this really makes sense together. It has beautiful flow. All of it feels like it's interconnected. There wasn't any moment where I was like, "Oh, we've entered into a new section. We're continuing on." The river doesn't ever abruptly stop. It continues to flow from one idea to the next. There's really solid, smooth transitions between everything. Even that rising tense chord idea into the resolution was a subversion of expectations that worked so well. We were expecting more and more tension, and instead, we resolved on the highest note. We subverted the expectation of more anxiety for that release. Not only that, but we shift the guitars from overdriven and electric to clean or acoustic. I don't remember. Um, and we bring in just these beautiful little lines and everything. It's more atmospheric and embellishing than a flurry of notes like we were getting before. It completely stands in opposition but feels like a natural extension of the idea we were just in. Really great writing. But what does it all mean? And that's the experimental part to me because I don't see the story here. And that might just be because it was very overwhelming for me. My relationship to the song as it went on was this is a lot of stuff. Ooh, this is groovy. This is getting tense, and we found resolution. And I don't know what any of that's supposed to do story wise for me. Maybe it would be something that unlocks in a second listen, third listen. Maybe it'll come to my mind when we hit the lyrics, but it's it's very smoothly disjointed, I suppose we can call it, which is an interesting description. Um, I do want to touch on the production real quick, and then we'll hit the lyrics. It's very compressed. This came out in '05. Wait, yesterday's came out in '05 too, right? It was gospel, and I talked about its production being overly compressed as well. Yeah, that's weird. Same deal then. Uh, if you watched yesterday's videos, this might be a bit repetition. I turned my volume up as high as I felt comfortable putting it, and it still just never felt like it was as wide and booming as the sound felt like it should be. There's this thing, this idea, metal music should be loud, right? And I don't know what the psychology is behind it. I don't even know if there's a lot of research behind this, but at least the angle that I see it is that guitars are overdriven And that typically means pushing the volume past the top where it begins to clip. Now we have overdrive pedals that achieve this now, but back in the day, if I understand this correctly, you would actually have to turn your volume up so high that the signal leaving your amp is so hot that it distorts, it cracks, it's overdriven. Um, and it's actually, the sound of the guitar is because of the volume. Like that relationship is it's a part of that sound. And so when I listen to metal music, or anybody listens to metal music, it sounds like it should be loud. And I think a lot of metal just has this feeling to it that it should be played at a high volume because of this. The way, I mean, a violin, you don't necessarily expect it to be loud, but you have something that's run through an amp and pedals and overdriven and compressed, and it has this sound like it's trying to break out of the technical confines of its equipment, and you can't have that small. It feels like a big, powerful sound. And so we get tracks like this that feel overly compressed and that they are containing that sound. And to me, to my ears, it just feels unnatural. And maybe it is just the '05 sound, whether intentional or not. Um, but it always sounds flat to me. Or at least this week, both examples have sounded flat. And again, it could be my biases. 2022 years used to 2022 production, but yeah, it's just a little disappointing to hear that power but not feel the power, if that makes sense. Let's hit the lyrics, see what's going on here, see if this unlocks anything. None of this has changed. We all look the same, addicted to the one who left you. I can't forget you. We colonized in war, predicting many more, addicted to the hand that fed you. You can't remember. So the first half reminds me of some sort of relationship. We all look the same. We're all the people who are addicted to our exes. We're addicted to the ones who left us and we can't forget them, right? But then we shift to a master and I don't know if I want to say master and slave, but ruler and commoner kind of vibe. We colonized in war, predicting many more, right? Addicted to the hand that fed you. Going back to the idea of addicted to the one who left you, but now it's a different phrase, a different concept. Same phrase. There's a lot of parallelism in here, in fact. Even the opening lines, nothing has changed. We can hear reverberating through the second half of the stanza, we colonize in war, predicting many more. Nothing is changing. We were in war, we will be in war. So they're drawing parallel lines between relationships and governing powers. And like I can kind of I mean I can see that. I don't think it's a stretch, but I don't know where they're going with it. Verse 2 says, "Your color, I wonder, the more trouble that we get in, the more fun if we don't get caught up in prefabricate that skin." So fabricate means to make. Prefabricate would be to pre-make the skin. I don't even know what that sentence means. And your color, the color that you own, I wonder. That's the whole line. I wonder what your color is, possibly, if we invert it. Then it says, the more trouble we get in, the more fun it is if we don't get caught up in it. I mean, like, I get it. It's saying that things are more fun when you don't take it so seriously, when you don't get caught up in the action itself and you just enjoy the moment. But what does that have to do with someone's color, and what is they wondering about it, and what does it mean to prefabricate that skin? Not the skin, that skin, a very specific one. Help me find out if this is all predictable, or is your troubled fate relentless in some ways, destroying all your days? Your troubled fate. So, a predestined negative aspect. We have to figure out if we can see it coming or if it's going to happen regardless. That you're going to destroy. So maybe they're self-destructive. They're relentless in the ways that they destroy their own days, but is this self-destruction preventable in any way? Or is it preordained, with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek when they say that? Just something that you're going to do, nothing you can change about yourself to get away from that. We finished the track out with these words coincide, 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 coincide. Self-taught, self-taught, suicide, 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 suicide. So is this about having a friend who is self-destructive in any way? It could be that they are subservient to somebody who isn't good to them. It could be that they are stuck in a grieving period of a relationship that is long gone. It could be that they take their negative actions too seriously and stick around in those cycles. And you're just trying to help them, and you find it difficult to do so. I don't know. I'm trying to tie that back to like the themes in the music. The opening bit was sort of just chaotic, tons of layers. And then we get to some groovy stuff. I think the groovy stuff was when he was talking about, how predictable is your self-destruction. And then the screaming bit, the most tense, was that these words coincide, self-taught suicide. And then from there, we have rising tension into relief and resolution, almost implying that they found a way to reach out and connect with this buddy, but I don't know. I feel like I'm grasping a bit there. I'm tying an entire understanding of the song on a few lines that stood out to me that I can kind of connect everything to, but I'm not 100% confident is what they were intending, the message they wanted. Those are my thoughts on Fall of Troy's The Holy Tape, dot, dot, dot. This is where you guys come in, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this one, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on. Above that, if you could, head into the description box. There's a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel, including links for ways to support the channel and a link to get into the Discord and communicate with the community. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We have a special selection today. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. We're going to do another, whatever this is, another themed video and our final special selection for the week. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.